Anyway, here with reaction, the author of the best-selling book, Vengeance, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. You're laughing. I'm laughing, too. I forgot the good old days. There is some truth in what he's saying in this regard. I think we have a series of scandals, and looking at Devin Nunes today, that the abuse of government surveillance by the FBI is so bad, and all that we're uncovering here is so bad. He's right. The mainstream media, you know, they want to destroy Trump, and they loved him. It's that simple.
Look, you and I know each other a long time, so I'm going to spend some of your money. Why don't you offer $100,000 to create the Barack Obama Fox News Sean Hannity Scholarship, if he will come on the show with you? That is Done. Such a funny, look, that's such a funny segment. Well, I'm just telling you, I listened to it and I thought to myself, this guy is so whacked. And he doesn't, today, I mean, he still doesn't get it. It's he just, doesn't. And then I'll never get it. Look, many, many years from now, in a nursing home or a nice retirement community, Barack Obama will be still living in a fantasy life. He'll think that Iran really wanted to have a deal. He'll think that high taxes really work. He'll think that welfare is a good deal. I mean, what you just put together is, as I think, funny a statement of who Barack Obama is as I've ever seen. And it captures this sense of being out of touch with reality.
Let's talk about the media in this sense. They've spent a year, Mr. Speaker. There's no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. We played the montage of Democrats saying there's no evidence of collusion. And yet we do have evidence of unbelievable instance of abusing the weapons of intelligence and surveilling, unmasking, and leaking raw intelligence. We know that the fix was in with Hillary and Bernie. We know that the fix was in Comey and Strzok. Rigged, they had an exoneration before even an investigation. We know that Hillary paid for a dossier full of Russian propaganda. We know that dossier now was used to get FISA warrants to spy on an opposition candidate and a president-elect and his team. And I'm not even talking about Uranium One or Debbie Wasserman Schultz. There are two realities here. And the media has chosen a reality of partisanship and conspiracy theories. Either that or I'm wrong. But they didn't think Trump could win, and people like you and me were right.
Look, what you have to understand, and I'm actually working on a book called Trump's America, trying to explain this because it is so unbelievably hard to understand if you're a normal person. Over here is a left-wing corrupt establishment which sincerely sees this entire fight as a function of identity politics in which if they lose, they will disappear. Over here are the rest of us who are thinking, you know, a lot of these ideas are really weird. I mean, Obama thought if you gave $100 billion to Iran, they'd be nice people. Obama thought it was terrific that we had more people on food stamps than ever before. You can go down a whole list of these things. And this is really a definition of life and death. And so what you and I are living through is a period where the old order, the establishment that inherited, and this is important to understand, they inherited Walter Cronkite, they inherited Edward R. Murrow, they inherited the old Harvard, and they inherited all these great centers of authority and responsibility, and they have gradually turned them into left-wing nutcake positions. And so the truth is we're in an identity fight in which if we win, they disappear. If they win, we disappear. That's why what you and I experience, because we're great friends, we're great warriors in the same cause, and we both understand if we lose, we will literally disappear. On the other hand, if we win, America will continue to move forward as the freest country in the world.
Why?
And I think that's why both of us fight.
You're describing it perfectly, to be honest. Or at least nobody, I think, really wants to know what truly motivates us, but that's a separate issue. But as a practical matter, I can shoot off a litany of Obama statistics and what his true record is on the economy. You mentioned Iran. You think he can bribe murdering thug dictators and, not mention radical Islamic terrorism. And then in a year of Trump, you can compare policy, significant changes with tangible results. But the media won't talk about any of it.
Look, you would think if Barack Obama was a sincere person who genuinely cared about African Americans, when you got a report this week that we have the lowest black unemployment in years because the economy is starting to work. Trump's tax cuts, regulatory cuts, pro-business attitude is starting to work. You'd think that having the lowest black employment, lower than any time under Barack Obama, that Obama would say, this is great. He can't afford to believe it.
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi can't afford to believe it. Chuck Schumer can't afford to believe it. Because if it was true, they would disappear.
Mr. Speaker, we always appreciate you being with us. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. The author of Trumped Up, How Criminalization of Political Differences Endangers Democracy. Harvard constitutional law professor Alan Dershowitz, Fox News contributor Sara Carter, Judicial Watch president Tom Fitton. Sara, because you have been on the forefront this week, we now know that the dossier, bought and paid for by Hillary with salacious lies, was used to get a FISA warrant against.
Well, yes, we now know that it was either in part used or it was a significant part of the FBI being able to get the warrant to spy on Trump and people within his campaign. But, Sean, when you're looking at the dossier, and I think actually leaking Glenn Simpson's testimony actually backfired on the Democrats. I mean, it really did. You look at that testimony, you see to yourself, first, Glenn Simpson said there was a source inside the Trump campaign. That's proven to be false. Now, what people have corrected that version of it and said, well, no, he was just talking about George Papadopoulos in London. Then you find out that Glenn Simpson wouldn't answer any questions as to whether he was pushing this dossier to the media. He kept stepping back. He wouldn't answer it. Then we find out he didn't even verify the information in the dossier. And when you look at all of this, knowing that the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC actually paid for this dossier, and that the dossier itself could have been part of a ginormous, a huge disinformation came by the Russians. I mean, it's clearly there's a problem.
Professor, let me go to you. And you make some really good points as it relates to the partisan aspect of all this. Now, I'm a conservative. I'm a proud conservative. I don't hide any of that. But we learned a lot that the fix was in. I want to use this analogy, that the fix was in. Poor Bernie Sanders and his supporters, they had no shot at all whatsoever. And even Donna Brazile admits that. Then you have Comey and Strzok. I don't believe I've ever heard of a case where you write exoneration letters months before you interview the people involved in an investigation. They didn't do the investigation, but they're writing an exoneration. And then it seems with the Russian dossier that they're trying to put the fix in there by using bought and paid for Russian propaganda, we now learn. And then you take it a step further, and that information was put before a FISA court and a warrant issued. As a constitutional scholar, I hope you are as afraid as I am about these issues, about the corrupt nature of all of this and our constitutional rights in jeopardy here.
I am very much worried about that. That's why I called for, right from the beginning, an impartial, nonpartisan commission of inquiry to look into every aspect of the last election, every aspect. What the Russians try to do in terms of the Democrats, what the Russians try to do in terms of the Republicans. This is a bipartisan issue. Every American suffers when the Russians in any way try to influence the election. Look, I don't think the Russians try to influence the election necessarily in favor of one candidate or the other. I think they try to influence the election in terms of destabilizing the American political system. And that's why having partisan partisan inquiries by congressional committees doesn't work. That's why having a special counsel who operates behind closed doors doesn't work. We need an open investigation commission. This is too important to all Americans to leave to any kind of partisan advantage.
Let me follow up with the dossier. It was partisan, bought and paid for. Remember, Christopher Steele didn't come on board with Fusion until Hillary and the DNC were paying for it. But that dossier used to obtain, at least in part, maybe significantly, as Sarah's reporting, to get a FISA warrant on a opposition candidate and a president-elect. Seems like a Fourth Amendment crisis here in many ways.
Well, I think it would be a Fourth Amendment violation if the material in the FISA warrant were known to be false. Now, under a case called Franks versus Maryland, it's not enough under the Fourth Amendment for it to be wrong. It has to be known to be wrong. And so, again, this should be looked into. Every fact should be investigated. Nobody should be afraid of the truth. Let the truth come out. Let the American public decide. But can I say one more thing? I have to tell you just one more thing. I know it's not on topic, but, you know, as the grandchild of American immigrants who came from a very, very poor country in Europe, I hope the president will apologize for whatever he said that demeans immigrants. The Statue of Liberty says, give us your poor, your hungry, people yearning to be free. We are a country of immigrants, and I just hope we can elevate the discussion about immigration and try not to insult people from any part of the world. And the president can do a great service if he just comes forward and says,
he did admit today that he used tough language. But he denied what Durbin, we're going to get into this later in the show, but he denied what Durbin said, Sonny Perdue. Right. And another senator in the room said they didn't hear it, but doesn't mean it wasn't said. We're going to get to that. Much matter.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't much matter what words he used. I think the thrust was a thrust against certain countries, and we just can't have that kind of attitude. It makes us look very bad in the world, and it really undercuts what our Statue of Liberty has long stood for.
Sara, I am, before I get to Tom, I'm not trying to keep you out of here, Tom, but I want to just follow up on something that Professor Dershowitz was saying. I have one source, I don't have two, that actually told me that there was one confirmation as it relates to the dossier, and I was given a name, and it happens to be somebody that is a corrupt individual inside the Clinton circles, and you know, I can tell by your face, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know exactly who you're talking about, and if that does come to fruition, if we find out,
then the court may have been lied to.
Then the court may have been lied to, and then what Alan Dershowitz said would definitely take significance.
Tom, tell us what Judicial Watch is doing.
Well, you know, I think there's going to be, as Sarah's indicating, a tsunami of information coming out on all of these scandals. We have the court ruling that the Clinton emails need to be released more quickly, so we're going to get all these Clinton emails that she tried to hide or delete.
These were the ones deleted, and we haven't seen any of them yet.
Yeah, that looks like they may all be
about yoga, wedding, and funeral, and
or as we found
emailing Bill, who doesn't email.
Or we found on the Wiener laptop classified information and pay to play, which I guarantee is going to be coming out. And then we had the court just yesterday talk about how he wants the Comey memos because he wants to review the Comey memos, which are the genesis of the Mueller operation. There would be no Mueller special prosecutor but for the leaking of Comey to the New York Times on one specific memo. So that material may be coming out. It's all building, and there are text messages that are coming out. And as Ed's talking about, now we're going to find out more details about the FISA or the intelligence surveillance abuses. Now, you know, my concern is that why are we waiting to find out about them after the reauthorization occurs? I would suggest we find out about the abuses before they reauthorize this for another 6 years.
This is such a good point because Devin Nunes, well, you know, I'll let you report on this, but...
Well, yeah, no, I mean, of course, yeah, Devin Nunes is going to, after they rule on the FISA Act, which probably is going to pass, is going to disclose what actually these extensive abuses...
Extensive abuse.
Yeah, in the Department of Justice and with the FBI. And I got to tell you this is coming from people within the intelligence community. This system has been abused. It has been abused viciously. And we know from what we've seen, right? We know from what we've seen that there needs to be an investigation. But let's do it before. Let's do it.
Let me quote for the professor. Professor Dershowitz, what Devin Nunes is saying, that there is clear evidence of massive abuse of government surveillance by the FBI and Department of Justice officials. I'm a civil libertarian first and foremost, sir.
Yeah. We civil libertarians, liberals and conservatives alike, have long worried about the FBI, its surveillance methods, and the potential for abuse. Remember, Comey not only leaked, he laundered the information through a Columbia law professor. He didn't have the courage to stand up in front of a TV camera and say, this is information that I'm going to give you because I want a special counsel to be appointed. He laundered it through a Columbia professor. These are issues that should be investigated. We have to know what surveillance is being used against Americans, and whether you're a conservative or a liberal, a Republican or a Democrat, you should care deeply about any abuse of this process.
If you believe in the Constitution and our constitutional rights, nobody should disagree with that. Last word, Tom.
Hillary Clinton and her top campaign aides need to be brought in, at least by Congress, to testify about what they knew and when about this dossier. Glenn Simpson refused to talk about whether the Clinton campaign, his paymaster, what their involvement was in directing Chris Steele's use of Russian intelligence to gather information.
A lot of news coming next week?
Oh, a lot of news coming next week, Sean.
A lot.
Democrats race against reality. That's the subject of tonight's angle. All right, when they're cornered and they're out of options, Democrats have a nasty, but it's a really predictable habit of racializing everything. They did it to Reagan. They did it to Bush. They even did it to McCain. And, of course, they did it to Romney. And they've been doing it to Donald Trump since the day he announced his candidacy.
First, we have to deal with the fact that the xenophobic rant he went on and on about Mexicans and them being racist and criminal. I mean, it was horrible.
God, even the notion that he talks in seems fictitious.
It's
Is
crazy.
that too strong a word?
No, it's not too strong a word. I mean, I also think it's racist. I think we can use that word.
Well, it didn't work then, and it won't work now. But they're trying. Yesterday, Senators Durbin and Graham, they wanted to foist their bipartisan DACA deal on the president. And by the way, Dick and Lindsay's Immigration Act is about as viable these days as Siegfried and Roy's. Okay, we've seen this before. Well, they pranced up to the White House for the grand unveiling, and they were flummoxed when immigration stalwarts, Congressman Bob Goodlatte from Virginia and Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, were already in the room, as was White House policy advisor, immigration expert Stephen Miller. Remember, just a few days earlier, when the cameras were rolling, the president said he would not sign any DACA deal without the funding of his wall and an end to chain migration and that stupid visa lottery system. Yet somehow the dynamic duo thought that they could, through charm and flattery alone, con Trump into agreeing to their solution that didn't meet the president's baseline. And actually, if you can believe it, their idea increased chain migration. The president, to their faces, said it was dead on arrival. Good for him. Durbin and Graham were so enraged after being spurned, somebody went to the press. They peddled the story that Trump had referred to Haiti and unspecified African countries as S-holes, and that we should try to get Norwegian immigrants here instead.
His comments said things which were hate-filled, vile, and racist, calling the nations they come from the exact word used by the president, not just once, but repeatedly.
Now, the president, in a tweet this morning, denied that he used that language, and Durbin clarified later that the president was referring to African countries whose citizens regularly use the visa lottery system, not Haiti itself. Now, setting aside the alleged remark for a moment, would you describe any of these countries as Shangri-La? I mean, if people there were living in Club Med, they wouldn't be trying to crash our borders. And I think it's important, don't you think, at this point, after all the verbiage, to take a look at some of the real facts about a few of the countries that can't keep their own people from leaving. Now, let's begin with El Salvador, a country I've been to many times that I've known very well for the last 30 years. Its capital has the highest murder rate in the world. Somalia, well, guess what? It's one of the largest state sponsors of terrorism, has one of the, is a safe haven for terrorists across the globe. And then, of course, Sudan. It's one of the 4 countries on the U.S. state sponsors of terror list, in addition to a lot of other bad facts. Now, I would not have called these countries what the president did, but they are rank with corruption, repression, and, of course, it's obvious, isn't it, that they offer their citizens little hope of a better life. In other words, they're hellholes. But for the Democrats and their media allies, who are forever feigning an affinity for the third world, facts don't matter. After all, race-baiting the president is so much more fun.
The president is a white supremacist.
That is absolutely racism with steroids.
The president of the United States is racist.
We voted for a racist.
They're not whole countries. For one, Donald Trump isn't their president.
We have in the White House someone who could lead the Ku Klux Klan, somebody who could be the leader of the neo-Nazi.
When it came to the issue of, quote, chain migration, I said to the president, do you realize how painful that term is to so many people? African Americans believe that they migrated to America in chains.
Now, of all the things I've ever heard Tricky Dick Durbin say, that one perhaps could take the cake. Now, is he really suggesting that the term chain migration, which has been part of the vernacular surrounding the immigration debate for decades, constitutes some type of hidden racism? It's a code language? Well, I think maybe he's been talking to Joe Biden.
Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
Remember the guy who's booing in the crowd? He had already too many mimosas early in the morning. Well, all of this demonstrates that the Democrats, Durbin, and all the rest, they had no real intention of working with the president on a DACA deal. I really don't think they did. Because if they were truly concerned for these DACA kids, dreamers, upwards of 30 years of age, well, I'll call them kids, well, they would give a little, and then they'd get a little. They knew the president couldn't accept what they were offering. But we know now what the real story is. They had zero intention of negotiating in good faith because somehow they thought they could guilt the president into siding with them. But I guess they don't really know him very well, do they? They are out of ideas and they have no solutions. The race card is the only one they have left to play. But look, despite the racial smears, the unfairness of it all, look at what Trump has already done for Black America. Black unemployment is at its lowest level since the Bureau of Labor Statistics started reporting the data back in 1972. It's at 6.8%. You know what it was in the middle of Obama's first term? 16.8%. Black family income fell by more than $900 per family during the Obama years. Fell. Just in the first 8 months of the Trump administration, Black family income has risen by more than $1,000. I'll take that direction any day of the week. With Chrysler now announcing plants moving from Mexico to the United States, the stock market booming and wages rising across the country due to Trump's tax cutbacks, America will thrive. Listen to Gary from Texas, a caller on my radio show this morning who expressed, I bet, how a lot of minorities really feel about this manufactured controversy.
Were you offended by what you heard the president say as an African-American man?
Not at all. He's trying to fight for this country and give Black people opportunities to get off these streets. We can't do it if we keep bringing folks all over the world with problems in that country. That doesn't mean we have to bring them over here and come into our city and then push our people back.
Well, those are the people the president is fighting for, people who want more economic opportunities. They're not anti-immigrant, but they want to take care of Americans first, the veterans sleeping on the street tonight, those with no opportunities, those who work hard but somehow maybe along the way got addicted to opioids. They need help. And no matter what Durbin or CNN says, that is a fact. The silent majority feels that the system is unfair, and you bet they want it fixed. And when Trump demands a better deal on immigration, one that's going to secure the border and keep illegals from competing with our citizens, like that caller, for jobs that they need, and he's fighting on behalf of all citizens. The president's fighting for blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians. You're here legally. You're an American citizen. He's fighting for you. And that's the angle.